This is the Therapy Chat Podcast with Laura Reagan, lcsw-c. The information shared in this podcast is not a substitute for seeking help from a licensed mental health professional. And now, here's your host, Laura Reagan, lcsw-c.
Hi, welcome back to Therapy Chat, this time live at Psychotherapy Networker with my guest, the wonderful, incredible Dr. Arielle Schwartz. I just had to make some eye contact for a moment there.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here with you again, to be in person.
It's so nice to be in person. Thank you. Yeah, so we are here at Psychotherapy Networker. Today's the first day in Washington, D.C., the Creativity Day. So before we get into our real content, let me ask you about what have you been doing here today so far?
I did a full day with Abby Blakeslee in somatics, which is my wheelhouse. I just came from listening to Prentice Hemphill, which kind of just lit me up and made my day, but honestly,
I wanted to hear that talk so
standing ovation, very, very motivating, very touching about where individual embodiment reads the collective healing arena. And I think one of my takeaways from that was just the felt experience of embodying dignity. And and how that connects to the length and your length, not bigger than and not smaller than, but really filling in the length of your body and the width and the breadth and breadth.
Yes, I really wanted to hear Prentice Hemphill's talk and also interview them. And I don't know, maybe that will happen. Also, Dr. Abby Blakeslee is someone who trying to do while we're here an interview with. So,
and that a very personal share here is that during Abby's talk, I was sitting there with one of my dearest friends who I've known for 25 years, who was my guest as an attendee. And as we sat there and with her attunement, it just unfolded into a generational healing process for me. And that's been an unwinding process probably for many, many years, unconsciously and certainly consciously for many years, and heightened in these last few months for a variety of reasons. And it to me, part of my takeaway of my own experience today is that the healing process just continues to unfold and unfold and unfold. And we might reach certain places of rest or integration phases, but that doesn't mean that there isn't another layer to uncover and integrate.
That's so beautiful. And I might start crying because that's just me. But I've also been doing some intergenerational healing recently. And I think what you're saying makes me think about that healing isn't just what we think happens in a therapy session. And it's not just, it's the way we live our whole life is a process of healing, the generational trauma, and it's beautiful because it does live in our bodies. And something that you said, when we first connected here, really, I feel my ancestors in my body. And the more connected to my body and my intuition and my attachment system and my right brain I am, the more I experience being visited by ancestors and, not just thinking about them or consciously gathering them in, but them coming spontaneously to me and showing up and telling me something where I'm really? It didn't come from my mind.
From there, exactly.
Exactly.
And the amazing thing for me is that I'll be dropped into that place and then say I have to shift gears and like go to the grocery store or write a chapter of a book or whatever I need to go do. And it just kind of gets set aside for a moment. It's like it just sits in the container, and then I drop back in and I have an embodied experience, and it's right there waiting for me again to pick back up. And to some degree, that also helps pace the process, right? It's not like I don't always have to be in that right brain depth embodied state, because if I did, I probably wouldn't get anything.
I know. How would you do anything?
But it's also a deep trust that it's okay to set it down for a little bit and to know that it's there waiting when we're ready to come back.
That's beautiful. Did you know that it would be like that? The healing process and like transgenerational ancestral trauma healing. Did you expect that?
When are you asking? Like, did I know when? Like 25 years ago or yesterday?
Did you know even like a few months ago? Was it an intentional thing that you undertook?
Let's see.
If you don't want to share it.
No. I'm just trying to reflect on like the origins of this particular wave. I think it's that sometimes there are waves that happen for me that are preparing me for something that I can't see yet. Mm-hmm. And that this wave feels like that there has been a series of, I would say probably about 3 or 4 months of being back in a really deep current of a transformational process that's emerging through dreams. It's emerging through embodied experiences that I've been having where it's a calling, and some of those embodied experiences are profoundly uncomfortable, meaning that like that many people know who followed me in one form or another that I have migraines, and that that I've had a few in our contact over the years, and I had one again this morning. And it's over by now, which I'm grateful for.
Me too.
Right? Especially after kind of riding some really deep emotional waves, it cleared, which is not uncommon for me. I've had migraines for 10 years or 12 or something. I lost count. But I've learned that sometimes they come with a really important package to unwind and unpack and listen to. And as much as I would like to not have to keep growing through that portal of pain, sometimes that is the front edge of a process that's needing to be known. And so recently that journey of the migraines has been bringing to the surface this particular lineage story that has just been needing to be known. And what it's preparing me for, I have like little guesses. I have little hunches. One of those hunches is that I leave on Monday to travel to South Africa. And I earlier today, just even naming that out loud, kind of like what just happened for you, there was just the spontaneous emotion that came to the forefront of like, there is a soul journey for me that's about to happen there that I don't have a flavor of yet, but I'm like starting to get some hints from this process that's preparing me for that trip.
Chills in my leg when you said that.
Yeah. Can I ask you the same question?
Sure.
Like when you think about your own unfolding, how, like, did you have a sense, or do you sometimes sense that process of it preparing you for?
I don't think I have been aware of a preparation, but I will say that for me, I've always been intuitive, and so like when I'm connecting with my intuition, I know that that's very real for me. And I know like that's a place that when I'm in that state or when I'm able to access that part of myself, I know this is whatever I'm receiving or whatever. I know this is real. And then, but I don't know why. So if it doesn't have a context that I can make sense out of, I think my cognitive brain tries to guess what a context is or make up a story about it. But I think and I have to go back to say also, I want to say something about the migraines too, but in the last year, and people who follow the podcast have heard me talk about this. I've talked about it on social media that we had a death in the family, and it was one of my husband's parents. So someone who isn't a childhood attachment figure for me, but I have been in relationship for like almost 30 years. So a very important person in my life. And through the grief process, it was a very transformational year. And I feel like, as much as I'm sorry to have lost that person, I feel so grateful. And I don't know if it was where I am in my life that I was like ready to be able to experience it as transformational, even though it was painful, that I'm like, it's impossible to ignore how much more open I've been during this past year. And I feel like so many things have developed and unfolded through this year that now I feel like I know I'm on a path, where before I think I felt like I was just kind of tumbling and stumbling through life. And I was thinking of healing as wanting pain to go away versus like really experiencing life as a tapestry of experiences, that the painful ones and the pleasant ones and all of the different gradations of how we can feel, just feel like this beautiful, I'll say again, tapestry. It's like something so woven that without all the pieces of it, it wouldn't be what it is. And I just feel so much more connected to being the truth about our existence, like with humans being connected with each other, with us being connected with the earth and all the beings, the animals, the plants, and all of the life on, including literally the land. And I didn't really feel that way before this happened. So, but I want to say too, like, I haven't told you this, but do you know Paula Scatoloni? Okay. She's been involved with the Polyvagal Institute, and I know you are too. And she's doing some sound healing practices with Sleep and Sound Protocol, using it in like a shamanic journey process. And I did that with her in December and January. Actually, it was December and January. And it was so far beyond what I thought that would be. But one of the things that happened is that she said that if we have very early attachment trauma, like pre-verbal, birth, newborn, infancy trauma, which I know that I do, but I don't know what it is because you can't remember. Or maybe you can. You get into the right, channel.
Right brain.
But she said if you have that, you may experience a lot of bracing in your shoulders, your neck, back. Well, I've already had that problem for probably about 5 years. Like, I'll wake up at night like this. And I'm having these weird headaches that come from like my occipital ridge and go up my head. And the only time I've had them before is when my kids went to college, which is opening up your attachment loss, right? So, but in these headaches, just to relate it to your migraines, I've never had migraines yet, knock on wood, but it feels like I'm accessing another part of myself that I want to be able to access. And it's like, I'm grateful that there's opportunity for healing, and not for healing to just be the pain goes away, or you don't suffer from what happened before. But, what else is in there? Because I feel like it's not just my healing. I feel like it's my mom, my grandmother, my great-grandmother, and of course the men too who were involved. Though I always think of it on the maternal side, so that's interesting. But So I didn't expect this to be where our conversation would go, but I'm actually really happy that we're talking about this because, it really ties into particularly your latest book, right? Applied Polyvagal Theory in Yoga, right? So can you maybe explain or give some background on how these things fit together? You're the one, the smart one here.
Yeah, I was in a big job. I didn't think about it together.
I don't want to not let you talk about that because her newest book just came out. And it's such a big celebration. It's already #1 Amazon bestseller, right? Pre-orders, yeah.
I know. So its official launch day was just on Tuesday. We are Thursday.
Aren't you lucky to celebrate with you?
Thank you. I would say that might be our little segue into it. Like the bridge between these topics is to celebrate, because I felt like for so long it wasn't safe to take up space. It wasn't safe for me to be seen. Yeah, I felt that way for a really long time. And there was something personal in my own personal history, and there was something generational in that history about whether it was safe to be seen and to have my voice in the world. So one of those bridges is, of course, celebration. The other, in terms of embodiment and safety and embodiment, and why I fell in love with polyvagal theory, is that the first time that I heard Steve Porges speak, which was something like 15 years ago now, he spoke at a conference, and he was speaking about the importance of embracing the whole range of our nervous system, right? The sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And I think up until that point, so much of the literature that I had read had really kind of like made the sympathetic nervous system the source of all of our problems. If we're stuck in fight flight, that's the cause of all of our health problems and so forth. It's like the beginning of the demise, and the everything falls apart from there. And that we had to get into the parasympathetic. We had to get into the relaxation response of the parasympathetic. And in kind of broadening out that whole picture through the polyvagal lens, it was this recognition that actually most of my arenas of suffering happened in the parasympathetic, not in the sympathetic. Even though the sympathetic has been like a survival mechanism, and in some ways even a defense mechanism, a way to take me out of the abyss of that parasympathetic drop off. And to, migraines, for example, happen in a much more parasympathetic state. And so this recognition that parasympathetic not only is rest and digest, but it also takes us into collapse or shutdown. And what we're learning more about that immobilization response to threat. And that immobilization response lives in me, and it also lives ancestrally and so forth. And that the sympathetic is a coping mechanism in a lot of ways. And that also lives in me, and it lives in my history. And that just as much as we want to kind of uncouple or unhook that immobilization from traumatic activation so that indeed I can rest without collapsing, we'll also want to unhook mobilization or the sympathetic response from threat so that we can now engage in that feeling of aliveness and all of the joy that can bring, and the playfulness and the capacity to engage in my yoga practice or climb a mountain or dance or whatever allows me to embrace that full expression of being alive. Yeah. So the book, The Applied Polyvagal in Yoga, is a guide. Like, it's basically a guide of how to do that, of the science behind it and why yoga helps us rebalance the nervous system and embody and energize and embrace its sympathetic in this really playful and fulfilling manner, and how to embrace that calming and that stillness in a way that doesn't re-traumatize us.
Yes. Doesn't re-traumatize us. Can you say a little bit about like the stillness that doesn't re-traumatize us?
Yeah. So when I first was introduced to meditation, I was in my 20s, and I was initially drawn more to a mobilizing yoga practice. Like that felt really safe for me, and that felt really balancing, really grounding, and I would leave class feeling excellent. Except that I was one of those people that when it got to Shavasana, I was like, oh my gosh, just get me out of this as quickly as possible. Like that Shavasana thing was the hardest posture of the class for me. And then I was introduced to meditation because I was going to school at a Buddhist-based school at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado, and we were required to meditate. And meditation for me was HELL. Like it was so bad, and I was just stuck in rumination and anxiety and everything that again like that the discomfort of Shavasana showed up in seated states. And sometimes we would have these practice days where we would meditate for hours on end in a day. And I would feel like I just would drop into these states that my mind took me to that were not pleasant. And I was 23. And I didn't know yet where my mind was taking me. I didn't have the landscape. It was just at the beginning of a really deep dive of my own therapeutic process to better locate my own complex traumatization and so forth. And so one of the things that I speak about in the new book is basically how to meditate safely. And there's some other really beautiful works out there, David Treleaven's work in particular of the trauma-sensitive mindfulness, and kind of expanding from that polyvagal perspective as to why stillness can feel really scary. And again, knowing for me that so much of my own trauma was located in that immobilization response. And so what happened instead of embracing stillness and going to Zen was that my sympathetic system came in to protect me from what I wasn't yet ready to feel. Hence my mind was going in circles and I was just ready to crawl out of my skin, Yeah. So the anchors to go into mindfulness or stillness or Shavasana or Yoga Nidra or non-sleep deep rest, whatever word you want to give to it now, the anchors that we need to do that safely come from really deep, slow preparation that help us find a mental anchor, an imagined anchor, literally a felt sense anchor of like who's helping hold me as I go into those places, whether that's another person, whether that's like a talisman or something that I can hold on to in the midst of that so that I can actually go towards those places and feel like it actually nourishes me. Well, if you ever want to make that's what we're going there for anyway.
Yeah. Going there to be miserable and ruminating,
right? Like, do I want my eyes open or closed? All of the choice-based practices.
Yeah.
Right? Is there a mantra or a word or an affirmation or even a position for my hands that helps to anchor my attention and hearing now so that if it's going to those places that could be a little off the rails, and probably the most important of all of them is the compassion-based practices.
Yeah.
Those become really beautiful anchors where, if there's a tender place that I'm touching, compassion can piggyback right into it. Who can help me hold that? Or can I turn towards that in myself with friendliness or loving kindness?
This book isn't really, it's not just for yoga teachers. It's not just for people who do yoga. Right.
So I have a book on that that's here with Pessy. That is the Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma, which is a mat-based focused set of practices. Again, some of them can be brought into the therapeutic relationship and into psychotherapy. Some of those are very simple practices as well. But it also gives anyone who's looking to do a more mat-based yoga practice tools of how to tend to trauma on the yoga mat. And it, again, follows a very similar arc of mobilization, immobilization, and applying these principles of polyvagal theory. The new book is different in the sense that it is really honing in on what are the practices, very simple practices for psychotherapists to do with clients. And then it gives a whole bunch of case examples, which I think is a really new piece. Yeah. So it really looks at all of this through the lens of what application in a session can look like. and then guides those practices.
Okay, beautiful. So then is it more for therapists or is it for everyone?
I think everything is for everybody because therapists are people too.
Of course. And therapists, everything we learn, we use for ourselves.
Isn't that true?
Am I right? Yeah.
True. So it's both in the sense that you don't have to be a therapist. You don't have to be a client in therapy to benefit from this book. It's one thing I will say, it's a little bit heavy on the research side. So it looks at why these practices work and what all of the research nowadays that's looking at this through the lens of neuroscience and neuropsychotherapy and can scan the brain and can scan the heart rate variability and what happens when we do these, thousands of years old yogic practices. So now we can explore, why did that breath practice make me feel so good? Or why might alternate nostril breathing be balancing for the autonomic nervous system? And looking at something like the ancient understanding of the nadis in the body and how those nadis are actually reflective of our autonomic nervous system. It's kind of right, little mind-blowing. Oh, that lunar nadi on the left side that's always been linked to receptive and inward turn of attention and quieting, and that solar nadi on the right side that is linked to that more outward focus and mobilizing and energizing. Those are our two branches of the autonomic nervous system. And when we alternate nostril breathe, we're actually keying into that in the body and the brain, and we're activating what we call the Sushumna. The Sushumna is calm, clear, peaceful. It's our central channel. It lets us be in alignment. And now we have that upper pathway. That's our social engagement, our ventral vagal. And it's just so cool to see these parallels at play.
Yeah, it's almost as if the ancient wisdom already had it figured out before the little science thing came along.
Did I really get the science to prove it? Well, nowadays, to bring it into therapy.
That's right.
And you need, you need a little bit of proof of the pudding.
Everyone needs to, feel so skeptical if they don't understand why. So, yes, I think it's very, very helpful. And I want to say that I have attended one of your trainings, the wonderful one that was last year in Mexico. And I know that you have so many ways that you teach and so many places that you teach. So I just want to tell everyone who's watching this that if you get the chance to learn with this magnificent powerhouse of a healer and teacher, take it. Because I came into that experience last year. You saw me. I was a frazzled mess. You were having a migraine. I was a frazzled mess. Just like when you met me again here today. But I left there being like, I have never felt so blissful in my life. I'm a powerful woman. I love myself. 5 days of
we get to keep transforming and growing together, don't we?
Yeah. But these practices that you're teaching, whether it's in your books and your trainings, they are very restorative to the system. They're very, and it's just like you find your own connection to how to feel well. How to feel really embodied. And, what you said in the beginning of this conversation, you talked about the back body and taking up space and, it's really powerful. So
I think one of my favorite pieces that I'll just toss in here is that while I feel deeply honored to relay these practices, to teach them, to write about them, the practices are the gateways, they're the portals, and that the wisdom lives inside of you and you and you and you and you, right? We all carry that wisdom. And so, it's not so much that I am doing something, but I am offering you the tools to access that deepest guidance system that lives inside of every single person. And that's an honor. That's a real,
yes. And that's what was so powerful for me is what you're teaching, and you are someone who is very I think you show a lot of cultural humility of explaining not only where these practices come from, but where you've learned them, your lineage of learning. And so that's very embodied too. But it's the message is that this is within all of us. And so you're just giving us 1,000 different ways to learn what they are and connect to that. And, I think what we're all trying to do here is make this world, a safer, more peaceful, loving, kind place for everyone. So
yes, for everyone. That's right.
And by accessing, our safe nervous system, that makes a difference. It ripples out to everyone.
Yeah, and that's true.
So, is there anything before we're going to have 2 little questions here at the end, but before we get into those, is there anything that you want to tell people about that you're offering? Courses, stuff through PESI, anything, like that you want to talk about?
I'll put a little plug out. I don't even know that PESI has it official yet, but I'm going to do the Sedona 5-day event here with PESI in November. And you can put that
order your calendar. Yeah, I'll be there. Say no more.
It's I can't remember the exact date. It's November 11th, somewhere in there.
Okay.
And it's going to be lovely. It's going to be really lovely just to go have 5 days, similar to the program you did. Really, it's going to be kind of a parallel program of just 5 days where we get to do this really deep experiential healing together. And yes, you'll learn the concepts behind it, but we get to embody it together. And then the rest of the day, we get to explore Red Rocks in Sedona, which is one of my favorite places in the world. It is such a beautiful, beautiful healing space. So that'll be, an event that I certainly want to invite everyone to attend. And then I have a 2-day applied polyvagal theory with embodied tools for emotional well-being, or whatever we call this beautiful program.
We'll link to this,
here.
so y'all don't have to.
Yeah, we'll throw the links in there. That one I think I'm doing again in May. It'll be on Zoom. So for those of you that aren't traveling and want to come do that with me on Zoom, that'll be a beautiful 2 days as well. We get some of the yoga in together and.
You know what I'm going to try to do? Might not be a PESI thing. I don't think it's a PESI thing, but I'm planning on trying to look you up in Oxford.
Oh, great! That's going to be beautiful too. That's in June. I have a 2-day in Oxford. That's just the yoga program there, and then I have a 3-day weekend in North Carolina. That's what I thought you were going to say.
Oh,
it would be fun too. The Artist Living Institute.
Oh, I just saw you posted about that. Okay. Maybe I'll be at that one too. I don't know. I just want to be where you are because I really just love what you do.
Well, let me tell you something. When you showed up, and I didn't know you yet, when you showed up in Mexico, and I would just hear these kind of sniffles from the back of the room. It was really, but you show up with so much openness, so much vulnerability, so much heart. And you might feel frazzled or whatever word you want to give to yourself in those moments. But what I believe you do is give permission. And you give permission to me to be more human. And you give permission for everyone that watches you to just show up as you are. So thank you.
Thank you. I got to tell everyone because I always, have to tell on myself that when she showed up for our recording and to be the first guest for this on time at 3:00, as Courtney is over here waiting. It was on time at 5:00 and we're running a little behind. So thank you for your patience. I was losing it. And you brought my friend Linda Ty with you. And we just did a lot of hugging and grounding. And she sang to me at my request. And you both supported me on either side and just made me feel, less alone in how I was feeling.
All right. That's what I love about Psychotherapy Networker. Right there. There are all of these little moments where we just keep showing up for each other. I didn't expect to do a transgenerational healing dance with my grandmother earlier today.
Yeah, and I guess
I just happened to do that in Abby Blakesley's training this morning. Yes. So we have these moments. And so for those of you that are watching from afar, come next year. That I think I'm the answer to your next question.
Yes. And that's the thing. I mean, it's so fun because you just see so many people and hey, you're hugging you. Let's have dinner. And It's just so wonderful.
It's wonderful. And if you come and you don't know anyone yet, you will know people by the end of the first day. And then know who you're going to have your meals with and all of it.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like all the restaurants around here. I know they probably count on this every year because there'll be like 20 people come in and can we get a table? It's like, they're pushing tables together. So it's awesome. All right. So here are the two questions that I wanted to ask you for Passy.
Good.
What advice do you have for new therapists?
All right. One of them is to come here.
Yeah.
The other one is, I think too often therapy training programs give this misguided message that somehow in order to be a therapist, you have to have your own SHIT together. And first of all, we get to keep growing the whole way through our own lives. And so who thinks that somehow stops once we put on the therapist hat? That we are there to also allow ourselves to grow alongside the people that we serve. And they're going to change you just as much as you're going to hopefully create transformation for other. And that is truly a gift. And that when you do, and you will bump up against your own edges, it is a generous gift to go to your own therapy. It's a generous gift. Like we are all, I know there's some therapy programs out there that require it. Mine did. Some that do not. And I go, why not? Mm-hmm. Right? Like, and some that I've heard of that actually, diminish or dismiss. Like somehow if you're going to your own therapy that it's pathologized or there's something wrong with you.
That's how I feel my program was. They were like, you better not let your issues get in the way. And so I got the message like, don't have issues. Don't have issues.
And certainly don't speak about that.
No, exactly. Hide it if you have them.
Right. And so we all, right. And so like to just know that you get to be human first and that is actually what makes you a beautiful clinician. And yes, get your own therapy. And yes, get a really good supervisor who helps you navigate through when your stuff is interfering with the efficacy of your work with others. Because if we don't know it, it's going to be a blind spot.
And that's when we can do harm, is when we are unconsciously playing out stuff on our clients because we're not aware of what. And I mean, nobody's perfect. I mean, we all have things we look back and go, "Ooh, if I had known that, that would have been really good to know." But, if you're doing your best trying to allow yourself to feel vulnerable and not, avoiding it so much that's where I think you can get into trouble. Okay. And then the second question, I made it a long thing. What are the signs that someone should go to therapy?
So we kind of joked before we started the recording because you're human.
If you're breathing, that's a sign you should go to therapy.
I mean, what's really tricky about this question, let's just like roll it back for a second, is that access to therapy is really, really challenging right now in our world. And it sometimes either requires that you have enough money or that you don't have enough money so you have access to services. Like it's really hard to get a good therapist nowadays. And so, yes, everyone, and yes, if you're suffering, and yes, if your suffering is interfering with your relationships or if it's interfering with your ability to accomplish your goals or whatever it might be.
Relationship with yourself.
Yes. And, I think it's one of the pieces that has motivated me to write specifically the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook, the Complex PTSD Workbook, the Practical Guide to Complex PTSD, all of my books that are written for the non-therapist population out there, is that I've always felt like the therapeutic tools that we learn shouldn't be somehow relegated only to therapists. Like I want to transfer this information. And I think that we're here like-minded. That's why you do your work as well. We want to basically hand that information out because information is power.
Yes.
So if you cannot afford or find the right therapist, or you're on a long wait list or whatever it is, there are tools that you can grab hold of. And certainly, of those, I'm just going to plug, like the Post-Traumatic Growth Guidebook will walk you through your own hero or heroine's journey into the and it gives all of these
I need to read that one.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's all the tools that I taught in Mexico, or that I'll teach in all of my places. Or if you're a yogi, go walk yourself through the Therapeutic Yoga for Trauma book, because it will take you through that transformational journey.
That is beautiful.
And with a plug.
Yes. Well, I mean, I think that it's good to recognize that therapy isn't the only way to heal, and
That's right.
therapy isn't accessible to everyone. But if you're suffering, I think what I'll just add on to what you said, even though it's supposed to be your answer, I'm just going to insert myself, is that don't believe that you have to be like feeling an extreme level of distress to seek out therapy. Therapy can be for personal growth. It can be for just getting to know yourself better. And so don't think that, because I don't know, don't you hear this a lot? People say, oh, well, yeah, these 10 really difficult things happened in my life, but, other people have had it so much worse.
Right.
So people think that I'm not suffering enough to go to therapy. And if I'm going to therapy, it means that something's really, really wrong, where it might just be that you're just unhappy more than you're happy.
Or things are going great and I want to be greater.
There you go. Hey, how about that?
I want to be even greater. I'm going back to therapy.
I want to be living my best life, as they say.
Exactly.
Well, Arielle, thank you so much for coming here and doing this with me and being my first little guinea pig case for this. And so I hope to see you more during this experience. But for now, so we'll go ahead and stop. Bye, everyone.
Thank you for listening to Therapy Chat with your host, Laura Reagan, lcsw-c. For more information, please visit therapychatpodcast.com.